Near Pokrovsk, nearly 100 Russian troops were reported killed in a single day. Ukrainian units describe a fog-covered assault that collapsed before it could break through, leaving multiple vehicles destroyed and survivors scattered. This isn't just about a single vehicle being hit. It's the story of an entire moving column intended to bring reinforcements that found itself locked from above while its wheels were still turning. Welcome to Strategic Horizon, your deep dive into the evolving dynamics of modern conflict. Ukrainian reports detail an assault involving approximately 90 troops, supported by about 24 light vehicles. Launched under dense morning fog, this formation was swiftly broken apart by early detection and precise drone strikes. The true danger here extends beyond the immediate loss of personnel and equipment. The real risk lies in the lost operational tempo. When a reinforcement push is annihilated on the road, the frontline units ahead can quickly run short of manpower and options during the critical hours that follow. A single strike on the lead vehicle can transform a narrow, damaged route into an impassable choke point, allowing FPV drones to systematically eliminate the entire cluster within minutes. This incident raises a crucial question. Why does this continue to happen? Why does Russia still risk exposed movements near Donetsk when constant surveillance is a given, especially when Moscow itself claims to have shot down hundreds of Ukrainian drones in just 24 hours? If the skies are never truly empty, what does survivable movement even look like anymore? Stay with us as we uncover the critical missteps that turned a routine reinforcement mission into a devastating ambush. The convoy entered a narrow corridor, its drivers likely believing speed offered protection. Instead, the road itself became a trap once the sky began watching. Moving in loose segments along a damaged lane, visibility was so thin that drivers could barely see beyond the next bend. Trucks navigated the center to dodge potholes, while others hugged the edge to pass, causing the line to constantly stretch and compress as each driver reacted to the broken surface. This stop-start rhythm created a predictable pattern, easily readable from above, as tire marks and brief pauses revealed where the column was forced to slow. High overhead, a Ukrainian reconnaissance FPV drone maintained its position, not rushing to strike, but patiently observing the timing of the movement and learning the convoy's habits. The drone stayed high for a steady view, keeping the vehicles within its frame long enough to confirm the unfolding situation on the road. As the trucks reached a section where the route narrowed between a shallow ditch and a low rise, the formation became inherently fragile. Passing became harder, and attempting to turn around risked blocking everyone behind. Yet, the drivers pushed through, perceiving stopping in the open as a greater risk than pressing forward. The dense fog ahead intensified this sense of urgency, making every second feel like a race against an unseen threat. Inside the trucks, troops were packed with gear, their usual sense of routine broken by the nagging need to scan the sky through dirty, almost opaque windshields. A few heads tilted upward, then dropped again, finding nothing clear to identify. This pervasive uncertainty became a pressure of its own. Meanwhile, the reconnaissance drone meticulously adjusted its angle, keeping the lead vehicle precisely centered. It understood that the front of the column acted as a critical lever, capable of freezing everything behind it. As the convoy navigated another damaged stretch, the lead truck eased off the throttle. The second truck closed the gap too quickly, forcing the third driver to brake hard to avoid a collision. In that instant, the previously loose spacing collapsed, causing several vehicles to bunch into a tighter cluster than the drivers intended. From the air, this compression was a critical signal. A single strike could now do more than just destroy one vehicle, it could effectively lock the entire road. The drone continued to shadow the column through the fog, patiently waiting for the precise moment when the convoy would commit to the narrowest point where escape routes were most limited. At ground level, the lane felt like a funnel. Each truck entering it further reduced the maneuvering room for the vehicle behind. Then, for a few crucial seconds, the fog momentarily thinned, Silhouettes sharpened, and the vehicles became visible as a single, distinct line rather than scattered, indistinct shapes. This was the precise moment the reconnaissance FPV needed. It could now confirm the convoy's position and density, holding the clear picture long enough for the strike team to act. Though the key action remained invisible to the troops on the road, the first hit yet to occur, the lock had already been set through patient, persistent tracking. The true breaking point arrived when the convoy continued its movement without any visible drone defense, becoming an easy target against a gradually clearing sky. As the fog began to dissipate, outlines along the road sharpened dramatically. Vehicles that had previously blended into the gray air now stood out starkly against the pale ground and dark tree lines. The crews below still couldn't see the sky clearly, but from above, the entire movement was perfectly readable. This mixed column of trucks and armored vehicles was following a single, damaged route that cut through open fields before eventually reaching scattered buildings. Crucially, there were no visible anti-drone nets stretched over cargo beds, no clear signs of electronic jamming, vehicles interspersed between trucks, and no escorts firing into the air to deter small aircraft. The convoy simply continued its advance in the same lane, each vehicle following the tire marks of the one ahead, making its pattern even clearer from a high angle. As the lead tank emerged from the fog, the rest of the column entered the exposed stretch one by one, transforming the loose formation into what resembled a thin chain pulled taut across the open terrain. Inside the trucks, soldiers shifted their weight and glanced through side mirrors, yet nothing on the ground signaled that they were being measured and timed from above. The road ahead appeared empty, but the true line of contact had already shifted upward, into the air. The immense pressure to reinforce was evident in how the trucks refused to slow down or reorganize, even as the road surface grew rougher and spacing became uneven. The column carried not just men, but a palpable sense of urgency, and that urgency compelled it to accept significant risk rather than pull back and wait for clearer conditions. Lighter vehicles joined the movement behind the main trucks, some smaller and faster, attempting to use speed as their primary protection. A quad bike darted along the edge of the field before merging back onto the route, while another light transport maintained a short gap behind a heavier truck to reduce its isolation. From ground level, these adjustments might have seemed flexible. From above, however, they simply compressed into one visible stream heading towards the same inevitable point. As visibility further improved, the convoy's path became fixed in the open, with no alternate routes immediately available. The damaged surface prevented sudden turns, and shallow ditches on both sides severely limited safe exits. When one of the lighter vehicles swerved slightly to avoid debris, the truck behind it shifted too late, drifting closer than planned and once again tightening the spacing. This minor correction inadvertently removed any illusion of dispersion, restoring the column to a dangerously narrow alignment. To those below, the sky remained eerily quiet. No warning shot or loud engine signaled an overhead threat. The absence of visible countermeasures allowed the drone to maintain steady tracking without being forced to break contact. As the convoy approached a low ridge that partially obscured the horizon ahead, it unknowingly entered a zone where its movement became highly predictable and escape options rapidly diminished. The soldiers continued forward, understanding that stopping would expose them on open ground, and turning back would only create chaos in the confined lane. At that critical moment, the column was fully committed to its route, its shape clear enough for a coordinated strike to be prepared. The decisive moment wasn't marked by an explosion, but by the stark realization that the entire formation had entered a space where it could be observed without interruption. The convoy was still intact, but its vulnerability was now irrevocably locked in place, and every meter forward only increased the cost of reacting too late. The first strike commenced precisely as the convoy's lead armored vehicle reached the tightest section of road, causing the spacing behind it to collapse into a single-file line. A Ukrainian FPV drone, already launched, flew low and fast, using the road as its guide, while the reconnaissance feed meticulously kept the target centered. The lead vehicle was chosen strategically. It was the linchpin that could lock everything else, as the trucks and tanks behind it would have no room to pass on the damaged lane with its soft shoulders. The FPV closed in from the front quarter, then dropped its nose and committed, delivering an impact that struck the lead vehicle with a sharp flash, quickly escalating into a heavy blast. The armored hull violently jerked. Its front section was critically damaged, and the vehicle slid sideways, effectively blocking the lane like a fallen gate.
A second later, the driver of the next truck slammed on the brakes. Its rear wheels chattered on the broken asphalt, and the vehicle swerved, finding only ditch and mud. The braking shockwave propagated backward through the column as each driver and crew reacted to the brake lights ahead without seeing the initial blast itself. The road instantly became a hard stop line, and the previously loose formation compressed into a compact, vulnerable knot. Troops ducked, gripped rails, and some began jumping down from trucks or armored vehicles, acutely aware that a stopped column under drone surveillance was a death trap. A few soldiers attempted to pull wounded men away from the wreckage, but the burning vehicles spewed intense heat and thick smoke across the lane, forcing everyone to navigate through a narrow, hazardous funnel. Then, follow-up FPV drones began arriving in quick succession, wasting no time searching. The newly created choke point had already formed a dense target cluster. One FPV drone plunged into the second truck as it angled towards the shoulder, the impact igniting another fire that quickly spread beneath the chassis. Another FPV struck a vehicle farther back, still packed with troops, its explosion tearing through canvas and metal, scattering debris across the road. The convoy was now utterly pinned by its own blockage, and the men who had planned to ride forward inside trucks or armored vehicles were forced to make life-or-death decisions within seconds. Some sprinted towards the nearest ditch line, instinctively feeling safer on lower ground than on the exposed road, while others clung to the wrecks, desperately hoping the smoke would offer concealment. A few attempted to reverse, but the vehicles behind them were too close and the lane too narrow. The desperate attempt to reverse quickly devolved into a chaotic jam of bumpers, tracks, and stalled engines. More FPVs continued to arrive, each one targeting the easiest formations: in a mobile truck, a damaged armored vehicle, a group bunched near a door, or a cluster forming behind a burning wheel. Secondary blasts began to erupt as flames reached fuel tanks and stored supplies, the sharp crack of additional detonations forcing soldiers to scatter even wider. Fire rapidly spread across the roadway, and the air choked with thick, black smoke. Men on foot ran in short, desperate bursts, then dropped, then ran again, knowing that any sustained sprint in open ground would make them easily traceable. Those who remained near the vehicles faced an additional grave risk. Burning wreckage, whether truck or tank, emitted a clear, unmistakable signature from above. Within minutes, the original mission was utterly lost. The convoy was no longer a reinforcement push. It had become a series of isolated survival attempts around a blocked road, with every pause creating yet another target opportunity. That initial, clean hit on the lead vehicle didn't just destroy one truck or tank, it eliminated the convoy's ability to flow. Once movement ceased, the remainder of the column transformed into a compressed map of targets, simply waiting for the next drone to arrive. The second phase of the attack began as smoke and flying fragments made the ground visibility even worse than the initial fog. Drivers whose engines still functioned attempted to slide off the lane or turn around, but the shoulder quickly gave way into deep mud and shallow ruts. Vehicles bogged down, angling precariously across the road. A truck attempting to reverse met another bumper too close behind, its effort devolving into a slow, grinding shove that blocked even more space. The convoy compressed further at its narrowest point. One wreck blocked the center, a stuck vehicle obstructed the edge, and the rest piled up with no clear lane to pass.
Men inside the trucks heard the crackle of fire and felt the road grind to a halt,
prompting them to climb down before the next impact found them sitting still. Some grabbed rifles and packs, while others struggled with doors jammed by warped frames, as intense heat and shock had already twisted the metal. A few soldiers rushed towards the ditch line, perceiving the lower ground as potential cover, while others chose the opposite side, dropping into a shallow depression near the field. The movement on foot was initially fast, but quickly became broken and sporadic, as each group desperately tried to avoid forming a clear cluster that could be tracked from above. The reconnaissance FPV drone maintained its angle, keeping the choke point firmly in view. It then began tracking the fleeing shapes, marking where they settled. The drone didn't need to chase every single man. The jammed road remained the primary magnet, and anyone attempting to help the wounded kept returning to the same burning vehicles. A small group paused behind a wreck to catch their breath. Another crawled into a trench, and each such pause became a visible dot on a real-time updated map. The subsequent strike didn't need to dive into individual trucks, as the battlefield had already arranged itself into one dense, confined pocket with severely limited exits. A heavier bomber drone arrived, flying higher and slower, lining up directly over the choke point where engines still idled and men still crowded near doors. The payload landed precisely where the road was most clogged. The resulting blast didn't merely destroy a vehicle. It hurled dirt and debris into the ditch, forcing the nearest soldiers to immediately break cover. Flames then spread into the very spaces troops had been using as shields, the intense heat driving them out from behind the wrecks and into the open ground. Some attempted to sprint across the field, but the soft soil quickly stole their speed, turning their desperate run into a stagger as the men began to separate into smaller pairs. A follow-up strike landed close enough to shake the very ground, the shock convincing any remaining drivers that staying on the road was no longer an option. One vehicle attempted a hard turn to cut across the field, but its wheels immediately sank and the chassis leaned precariously. The crew quickly abandoned it, joining the flow of men on foot. The convoy was now split into two simultaneous problems: burning vehicles blocking all movement and scattered survivors who could be tracked as they attempted to flee. At this moment, the safest route was far from obvious. Remaining within the jammed wreckage invited another devastating hit, yet running into open terrain stripped away their last vestiges of hard cover. The final phase unfolded as secondary explosions began to ripple through the blocked corridor, transforming the damaged convoy into an impassable, burning barrier. Following the initial wave of strikes, flames spread relentlessly from one wreck to another, and sudden, violent blasts erupted from within cargo beds and fuel tanks. These subsequent detonations propelled metal fragments across the road and into the nearby ditch, forcing anyone still close to the vehicles to instantly dive for cover. While the exact contents inside each truck were not definitively confirmed on the battlefield, the pattern was clear. Bursts of fire and sharp concussions appeared seconds after the initial impacts. Each new blast expanded the zone that could not be crossed, and the smoke thickened into an impenetrable wall, obstructing both vision and movement. Drivers who had hoped to simply wait out the attack now faced overheating or stalled engines, leading to some vehicles being abandoned even if they remained otherwise intact. Men who had attempted to regroup near the edge of the road scattered once more as another explosion rocked the area, their efforts to form a defensive line dissolving into isolated, desperate survival moves. The choke point had become a complete no-go zone, as debris and burning fuel made it impossible to push through without risking further ignitions. A few survivors desperately tried to carry wounded comrades away from the inferno, but the distance to safe ground grew exponentially with every secondary blast that expanded the danger radius. In less than an hour, the original mission to reinforce the front line had devolved into a desperate struggle to escape the kill zone. The column no longer possessed a clear direction. Forward movement was utterly blocked, and reversing was tangled in insurmountable wreckage. Small groups began to withdraw on foot towards tree lines or shallow depressions, while any remaining vehicles still capable of movement chose the first open gap away from the road.
This critical reinforcement push was effectively halted before ever reaching its objective, not by a prolonged firefight, but by a precise chain of impacts that systematically stripped away all mobility at the most critical moment. Up ahead, units waiting for support never saw the convoy arrive, and the expected increase in manpower simply failed to materialize. This delay forced frontline elements to drastically adjust their timing, and planned pressure on opposing positions slowed considerably as the profound gap in reinforcements became painfully clear. The road, once intended as a vital supply and troop artery, had instead become a stark reference point for future strikes, its vulnerability exposed in full view. Any subsequent movement along this same route would now carry the indelible memory of burning trucks and scattered equipment. Recovery teams could not approach quickly, as unexploded munitions and unstable fuel fires rendered the site dangerously hazardous. As darkness descended, the remains of the convoy continued to mark the narrow lane, the wrecks forming a visible scar that precisely indicated where the advance had been decisively stopped.
The battle in this sector did not conclude with a formal ceasefire. Instead, the immediate objective of building combat strength at the front had unequivocally failed. Surviving men withdrew in scattered fragments, and any surviving vehicles were redirected away from the destroyed corridor. What began as a critical reinforcement run concluded as a stalled advance, its momentum utterly broken before the line of contact ever shifted. In the span of a short engagement, mobility was stripped away, cohesion collapsed, and the timing of a larger operation was severely pushed off schedule. This is how a single blocked road near Pokrovsk can fundamentally reshape the next phase of fighting. Because once movement ceases under a constantly watching sky, recovery becomes infinitely slower than destruction. One blocked road was enough to halt an entire reinforcement push. That is the cold, hard reality near Pokrovsk today, where a reconnaissance FPV can quietly lock onto a moving column long before anyone below even comprehends what is truly happening. This story was never solely about burning trucks or dramatic explosions. It was about 3 decisive moments that irrevocably changed the outcome in less than an hour. First came the silent detection and meticulous tracking from above. Then, a single precise strike on the lead vehicle transformed a narrow route into an unyielding, sealed choke point. Finally, secondary blasts and relentless follow-up hits completely erased mobility, forcing survivors to scatter long before they ever reached their objective. Momentum didn't collapse due to a prolonged firefight. It collapsed because movement was frozen at the worst possible location. And once that road was blocked, every second worked against the entire reinforcement plan. The bigger question now is, what comes next? Will larger formations continue to push forward to maintain pressure on the line, even if it means accepting higher losses under constant drone surveillance? Or will future reinforcements adapt, shifting towards smaller groups, night movements, stronger electronic warfare support, and lighter vehicles that prioritize speed and dispersion over heavy armor? Share your views in the comments below. If this analysis helped clarify how drone warfare is reshaping modern combat, please like, share, and subscribe to Strategic Horizon for more clear and grounded battlefield breakdowns.